Chapter 8 is on nonprofit organization, capacity, and collaboration. So the capacity building movement is a transition from just the emphasis on replicating programs or doing the same programs over and over to building the strong nonprofit organizations that can sustain the program. So the focus shifts from the programs themselves to the nonprofit organizations. The problems with the traditional models of grant making is that they supported the development and delivery of the programs versus the strengthening of the organizations. So there's an encouragement of organizations to keep their overhead costs low in the traditional model and maximizing the resources spent on the direct program services with little attention being paid to the strengthening of the organization itself. The problems resulting from lack of capacity, which is the capacity within the organization, is that there's difficulty expanding on successful programs. There's a high burden on the nonprofit staff and the volunteers of the organization, and there's the potential to undermine the effectiveness of the programs or performance of the organization over the long run when the focus is simply on the replication of programs. So what is capacity? We'll talk about defining and understanding capacity. Capacity, according to the research by Light in 2004, is everything an organization uses to achieve its mission. Capacity building is the process to develop, sustain, and improve the delivery of the nonprofit's mission. Now, breaking this down in this overall capacity into smaller components, as determined by Hudson in 2005, would be breaking it down into internal and external elements. And then Connolly and Lucas in 2002 said the elements of capacity were these: mission and vision and strategy, governance and leadership, ability to deliver programs and ensure the impact of its programs, strategic relationships, internal systems and management. So that study determined that those were the smaller components of capacity, what capacity actually is. And then by Letts in 1999, capacity was defined such as program delivery capacity, program expansion capacity, and adaptive capacity, or delivering on its mission. So there were three components there determined what capacity actually is in terms of program delivery, expansion, and adaptive capacity, which is the ability to change and deliver on the mission. So capacity can be looked at in a number of ways. So further to talk about what capacity is, it involves more than what the organization has. What the organization has are facilities, structures, and systems. And it's more than what the organization can do, the skills of the leaders and staff and the volunteers. And it may be more related to what the organization is, which includes intangible qualities such as orientation, commitment, and culture. And this was determined by Kibbe in 2004. So you can see that capacity can be defined in a number of ways. We're going to talk about venture philanthropy here. There in the 1990s, there was a shift of the focus from programs to support for capacity building. So in the 1990s, there was a shift, there was a change from the way that nonprofit organizations were focusing primarily on their programs to looking at the support for the capacity building. What can they do? What are they capable of doing? What can they do in the future? Because we've just discussed what capacity can be. It's a model from the venture capitalists who emphasized building capacity in a company for sustainability. So venture philanthropy is a model that was derived from the venture capitalists that emphasized building capacity into a company for its long-term sustainability. Funding for capacity building remains modest. Most nonprofits use internal resources, operating funds, or retained earnings in order to build their programs or build their capacity. So this is something that is a modest trend, but a trend for the future, so that funding for capacity building hopefully will be increasing in the future, because most nonprofits now use their internal resources, their operating funds, and their retained earnings to be able to respond to the needs for program development. The recession in 2007 shifted the focus to retaining essential programs, further reducing available funds. So that was just part of the discussion in the textbook, is that the recession shifted the focus so that retaining essential programs was the primary focus as opposed to capacity building because of the recession. The pressure on efficiency has heightened interest in collaborations and mergers. So as the environment changes, that macro environment, the efficiencies are important, and therefore the emphasis on collaborating with other organizations and merging with other organizations in order to achieve the missions. So it's important to understand what the environment does and the changes and the shifts and how it affects nonprofit organizations. So now let's take a look at figure 8.1 with McKinsey & Company's capacity framework. Now we have an understanding of the various elements of capacity and the broad array of activities that can be undertaken to enhance capacity. But how do these elements fit together, and how should an organization begin to address capacity in a holistic way? So that's what this particular graphic is to depict. So this is where you would take a look at this pyramid that implies relationships among the elements and suggest a process for capacity building. So the model begins at the top with aspirations, which encompasses the mission, vision, and values, and at the next level of detail are the organization's strengths and skills, that is, what it knows and what it can do. And at the bottom of the pyramid are the human resources, the systems, and the infrastructure, the organizational structure. So in this pyramid, all 6 elements are surrounded or embedded within a shell called the culture. And the culture affects all the elements and provides the overall environment in which capacity building efforts may be taken. So as we discussed earlier with regards to change leadership, the culture includes the shared values, the attitudes, the feelings, the beliefs, the rituals, the habits, the codes of conduct, and other characteristics of the organization, the invisible rules that support and hinder the initiative for change. So this graphic shows that that culture is the invisible thread that runs throughout the entire subject of capacity building. So this is just another way of looking at how a nonprofit organization can build capacity. So we're going to talk about the organizational life cycle. What is the life cycle of a nonprofit organization? And there's discussion in the text about the various organizational life cycles. The first is the life cycle model section which describes how organizations grow, mature, and eventually decline. So there's different models that have been developed by different authors. There's a capacity and organizational life cycle, where capacity is important at every stage of the organization's life. The elements of capacity that are most relevant may be different in each stage. So this is another model. And the types of capacity building activities are undertaken vary according to the organization's size and age. So this discussion in the textbook is to talk about the general life cycle of organizations and how what organizations do at different points vary depending on the point in which the organization is operating in its life cycle. So in 2001, Simon's study produced these stages of the life cycle of nonprofits, where there's 5 stages along the left, and then there's the description of the organization and how it operates on the right. And so in the first stage, imagining and inspiring, the organization has not yet been founded. It is still an idea or a dream. This is a stage characterized by enthusiasm, energy, and creativity, and moves on to stage 2, where it's founded and framed. The organization is created and begins to frame its program. There's still great enthusiasm and energy. Stage 3, ground and grow. The organization is building its foundation and growing. There's an emphasis on accountability, but rapid growth can be challenging to management. Stage 4, produce and sustain. The organization is mature and stable. It may be on autopilot. There's a risk of becoming stale, and maintaining momentum is a concern. And then stage 5, review and renew. The organization revisits its mission and programs and undertakes change. Minor changes may take it back to stage 4. Major changes may take it back to stage 2. Returning to one of the earlier stages then may lead to renewed and continued growth. So this is to understand, again, the life stages of nonprofit organizations. Collaborations and mergers. Collaboration is when 2 or more organizations work together toward common objectives. Mergers are where 2 or more organizations are combined into one corporate entity. So those are important concepts to understand the difference between collaborating and merging. The continuum of nonprofit relationships by La Piana has two axes, effort and complexity and integration, and three categories, collaborations, strategic alliances, and corporate integrations. So read about this and understand that collaborations and mergers occur with nonprofit organizations, and this is one of the ways that nonprofit organizations can grow and can achieve a greater reach is by collaborating with others or by merging two individual organizations into one. So here we've got La Piana's graphic depiction of the continuum of nonprofit relationships. And you can see here where there's collaboration, strategic alliances, and corporate integrations, and the continuum where nonprofit organizations may operate. So you've got the collaborations down in the bottom left where there's less integration and less effort and complexity. And then as you move along the axis, you may have more integration, more effort and complexity where you're in alliances, and then when you're completely integrated, you have more of both. What are the drivers of collaborations and mergers? Well, there's complex motivations as determined by Sawa in 2009. There's benefits in providing services and benefits to the individual organization. So those are complex motivations as to what drives collaborations and mergers. It's not just simple. The nonprofit collaboration from a theoretical perspective talks about resource dependency theories, where resource constraints and the need for organizations to reduce uncertainty in their environments, as well as the institutional theory, which is the need for organizations to develop a shared response to problems to achieve legitimacy. There's internal and external drivers. There's liability, viability, and survivability, determined by McCormick in 2001. So these are all reasons that collaborations and mergers occur in the nonprofit sector. So we've talked about the reasons to collaborate and to merge, and there are also obstacles to collaboration in the nonprofit sector. And some of the obstacles that were discussed in the text are motivations, culture, egos, and costs. And all of those can create problems when nonprofit organizations are intending to collaborate. So now we know that there are obstacles to collaborate and what common obstacles to collaboration for nonprofit organizations can be. But what are the conditions for success? The variables that are required for successful merging or successful collaboration would be that the organizations are mission-driven, there's commitment from top leadership, there's a high level of trust, there's relatedness, meaning they can understand each other and they are related, they're similar, and the process, the conditions for success would include the process itself. So we've talked throughout this chapter about the whole overview of capacity building and the capacity building movement, the problems, the individual ways in which capacity can be built. We've talked about collaborating, we've talked about merging, we've talked about organizational life cycles, and we've talked about the problems, the obstacles, and the conditions for success. And this is an area of potential growth for nonprofit organizations. And if you work within a nonprofit organization, or you may have a career within a nonprofit organization, you will most likely encounter at some point some of this capacity building as well as potential merging and collaborating with other organizations.